passed. Item number 8, hear visitors on matters pertaining to city business. Under the Texas Open Meeting Act, the council is prohibited from discussing, responding, or acting on any comments or items that not have been properly posted on the agenda. First one I got is Michael Kelly.
Last year I spoke to y'all at the end of the year concerning perception and how our perception is actually your reality. We continue to see things happen that give us the perception that things aren't exactly being done above board. In fact, I would call it behind the back of the council. And I'm concerned with the report that Mr. Dixon just referenced. As I've been doing each time I've come up here, I'll explain to you what I mean by what I say. First, I'm going to address something that happened earlier. Mr. Dixon entered into negotiations to buy out the remainder of the contract of Mr. Miles. During the meeting where this was discussed, Mr. Fortenberry asked the council if they were aware of this action, and there was silence. We paid legal fees for this negotiation. Then we paid the buyout. Mr. Dixon explained this is what Adam wanted. My question is, or my thought is, what options was Mr. Miles given? During this discussion, Mr. Walkendorf stated Mr. Dixon was hired to take care of the city's legal issues. Other than being a witness to the mayor's alleged violations of the Texas Open Meeting Act, not sure what legal issues there were with Mr. Miles at the time. Here the perception is that someone on this council either authorized Mr. Dixon to begin this process, but we have no proof of this. But the perception is there, and I've heard this from other people not associated with this council. Second, Mr. Dixon went out and found a single candidate to replace Mr. Miles. He then negotiated the contract, and at the December 17th meeting, where the contract was approved, council members were not provided the contract prior to the meeting. A contract which is a 3-year contract worth approximately $450,000 was approved without giving the council enough time to consider the contract. After the meeting, an individual asked the mayor if he had read the contract. He had indicated yes, he had, and that he reads fast. I believe this was a 10-page contract, and after reviewing the meeting, I don't see how anyone could have read the contract as the meeting was in progress at the time. Perception here is the contract was either provided to some individuals prior to the meeting, or perhaps the contract was not read. Third, at the same December 17th meeting, Councilman Fortenberry asked the council if anyone had met with Mr. Thomas before finalizing the contract. No one spoke up. Councilman Fortenberry then had to ask directly to the mayor if he had met with Mr. Thomas, to which the mayor replied, yes, we had a get-to-know-you meeting. Mr. Fortenberry explained he was just asking a question, felt he needed to, and the mayor replied, I knew you would. So if you knew he was going to ask the question, why didn't you answer when he first asked the council? The perception here is you're not being as transparent as we've been promised. Fourth, during the same December 17th meeting, Mr. Dixon, through several votes, was given approval to compile this report of the complaints that we've heard about. This report will be paid for by the residents of Hewitt. It will consist of reviewing audio recordings and writing a report. This is double work. The Ganaway law firm has already completed the report, completed their investigation, presented their findings to executive session behind closed doors, where no written report was given, so no open records request can gain access to that information. We spent approximately $17,580 with Lynn Ross and Ganaway on this investigation. That alone was almost our budget for 2018. We've spent approximately $24,140 with Binger and Associates on the investigation. That's $41,720 on the investigation we have already spent, and now you're asking Mr. Dixon to redo it. We have already exceeded our budget in 2018-2019 fiscal year. $27,447 were the total for October and November. That's $7,447 over budget. In my world, the boss gets really upset when you go over budget like that. And we still have 10 more months to go. The concern here and the perception is that information is being handpicked to make things seem petty. We haven't seen or heard any information from Ganaway concerning the investigation they conducted. Mr. Dixon says that he is here to solve problems. But without the council's direction, I'm not sure what problems he needs to solve if you haven't asked him to solve anything. We've heard the mayor compare himself to Mr. Trump, President Trump, and what he's going through, saying, if you don't like what I'm doing or what I have done, then vote me out in May. I still don't think we're being told the entire truth. You removed the city attorney, the city manager, and the mayor, who is under investigation for multiple infractions, remained mayor and did not step aside. I'm not asking you to step down, step aside, not run the meetings during these investigations. I say bring in Ganaway. Have them give their report to a public forum. I won't ask everybody to show hands if they agree with me on that. I won't ask anybody to show hands if they feel we've already spent enough money on the report. But I will raise my hand and let you know that the firm that you selected with a 6-1 vote, the dissenting vote being Mr. Kakalian, now you don't like their report. Stop saying there was a conspiracy. I'm not buying it, and no one else in the unit is either. Thank you.
Mr. McCallum, thank you for your report. Next person, Mike Field.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for the opportunity to address you. I'm Mike Field, a longtime Hewitt resident and a retired attorney who served something like 40 years in the public sector. And my comments are not aimed at any particular council member or the city attorney, but I believe that I need to comment on what I consider a very flawed approach to the selection of the new city manager. And I offer as evidence to you of these flaws the difference between the way the city of Woodway picked their new city manager and the way the city of Hewitt picked theirs. And before you think it's an apples to oranges comparison, let me say no, it's absolutely apples to apples. Both city managers left precipitously. You didn't have a longtime city manager that announced in advance that he or she was going to leave and give the council 6 months to orchestrate a orderly transition. The city of Woodway found a competent individual to serve as interim city manager. They then advertised the position, got a number of highly qualified applicants. They reviewed the applications, they reviewed the resumes, they checked the references, and then they winnow the applicant pool down to a few and interviewed them. After doing all that, they selected the person that they felt would be the best fit for the city of Woodway. City of Hewitt did none of that. You apparently hired the first person that came up on your radar screen. In doing that, you gave all the negotiating power to the applicant. There was no second tier applicant that could have said that, you know, if the negotiations became protracted and perhaps the new city, the candidate for city managership was overreaching in what he wanted, you didn't have a backup to go to. You put all the power in his hands. That's no way to run a railroad. Equally troubling was the way, already referenced about how the contract was approved. As executive counsel for the Brazos River Authority, if I had come to my board with a major hire that required a contract approved by the board, give them less than an hour to review it and said, speed read this and us approve it, they'd have given me my head on a platter. And they should have. The way it was approved is inexcusable. What should have happened is the city attorney should have said, and maybe this is the case, the negotiations were protracted. The ink is barely dry on this. I'm sorry, council members, I didn't have time to get it to you in advance. I'm requesting that you pull it down, review it at your leisure, and take it up to the next council meeting. What's particularly troubling about this is not only the improper procedures that were used, but the foolishness in doing that. You had the votes to elect the man. When you got a winning hand, don't act like you're trying to pull a fast one. It's ridiculous. You've made your new city manager come in under a cloud. You've given ammunition to everybody who thinks you're trying to run around things. You ought to be like Caesar's wife. When you're winning, you ought to be above reproach. It looks like this place is being run by Curly, Moe, and Larry. Now, I'll conclude with a comment to Mr. Dixon. Mr. Dixon, I read the op-ed piece in the newspaper this Sunday. Having read that, I don't know how to describe it. It was stark, I'll say that. I think the chances for you to play a role of a conciliator and bring this council together are almost nil. I would consider, if I were you, possibly reflecting on whether you're a positive or negative influence on this city going forward. I won't presume to tell you what to do, but I think it's something you ought to consider. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, ladies.